I want a VTuber model. Let me just... Hi. So I really wanted to improve my drawing and art, but I was low-key getting bored of just drawing normally, and that's when I came across this glorious conception known as VTuber models. Take cute anime art and make it me? That's crazy overpowered. So I wanted that power, but see, my art skills and patience is pretty subpar. So in the name of self-improvement, I decided to make my first ever project. But I really wanted something simple, something cute, something iconic. I wanted this to be more of an exploration of Live2D, not quite focusing on making the drawing itself perfect. So of course I went with a certain blue hair, blue eyebrow guide that everyone's familiar with. I also wanted something a bit less complex and detail heavy, so I went for a chibi style model. I've literally never drawn chibi in my whole life, so made this learning goal number 2. So at this point I'm basically done with the sketch and I'm moving on to the line art. I didn't really watch any guides on rigging in particular, but I was cognizant of the fact that all the parts I wanted to move separately needed to be drawn on separate layers, so that's basically what I did. Of course, not watching any guides on Live2D would soon come to bite me in the ass when I realized the sheer number of things I either forgot to draw or forgot to separate. Witness me now having a whirl of a timeline in the sketch, while entirely forgetting to line the all-important number on Miku's arm. I would later only realize this mistake when the whole model was already rigged. Now, a mere 1 minute and 30 seconds into the time-lapse, I have run out of things to say, as there's really nothing to commentate about over this riveting footage of just line art. Regardless, we power through, and I continue to draw the shirt with meticulous detail. I proceed also to draw the skirt on 3 separate layers. This turned out to be a futile effort as I ended up not even rigging the skirt. Finally, some color enters our life. I made sure that my coloring extended well past the overlaps of the model, so that when I rigged the model later and parts started moving, there would be no weird gaps in my model. Or at least that's what I assumed. I later learned that I had failed in this endeavor, resulting in me needing to stretch my model in slightly weird ways later on, hoping that no one would notice. It is here that I realized, shit, I've drawn an egg. I desperately fixed Miku's large forehead by abusing morph tools to cover my mistake. At long last, we move on to my most dreaded section, shading. I justified my lack of detailed shading by assuring myself that this was a simplified model for the sake of learning. The reality was that it was likely that my shading skill is precisely as you see. I turned on this painfully bright red background to ensure that I hadn't left any transparent areas in my model. As you know, the bucket tool is not very precise, and I had left an egregious number of transparent areas which I duly fixed. With my model seemingly complete, I finally loaded up Live2D for the first time ever. The last 30 seconds of footage you saw is at 40 times speed and was entirely useless, as all the things I missed when drawing came to bite me back. I present to you the Saga, the reloading of the art program. So, I spent all this time rigging the face happily, but it entirely slipped my mind that the eyes, eyebrows, and lashes definitely need to be separated because people actually have 2 eyes, not 1. And also, Miku has 2 pigtails, not 1. I also forgot to color the outside of Miku's lips, and that's bad, because that meant that when Miku's mouth was closed, you could still see the inside of her mouth, and that's simply not how mouths work. One of these reloads was also because some sections of the face refused to mask. This befuddled me until I realized that I actually had to clip the layer within Live2D and that my PNG file would not just do it for me. In truth, I could have reloaded the file without restarting the rigging all over again, but at the time I reckoned that restarting each time would be better because I wouldn't lose much progress given that I had already restarted during the first reload. Finally, the saga concludes and I begin rigging for real. Here I began with the eyes because I needed motivation after all that wasted time, and also it was the first thing on Live2D's tutorial that's on their website. At first I tried to rig the lashes in totality, but then I realized that the upper lashes need to be separate from the lower lashes. As I was sick and tired of reloading my art program, I just decided to duplicate the layer in Live2D and erase the top and bottom lash of each layer, and it seemed to work out. I also realized that the whites of the eyes for some reason protruded beyond the lower lashes, but I fixed that in Live2D as well. To my surprise, everything here went off without a hitch, and I finally had my first taste of victory in the form of a single working eye. I contemplated attempting to flip the eye or somehow duplicate it, because that's the whole purpose of drawing these models symmetrically, but then I realized that my taste of victory was growing stale, and I decided to just rig it manually, as flipping the eye was beyond my low level of skill. I then moved on to rig the mouth, which is possibly the most scuffed mesh I have ever seen. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I held on to the Live2D website tutorial like a baby, desperately trying to interpret the Japanese characters that they retained in the pictures provided for the English tutorial. Zooming away from that atrocious mess, I began on rigging the eyebrows, the bending of which turned out slightly squiggly, but sufficiently decent for fast. Due to my lack of knowledge on how to flip things in Live2D and my lack of will to learn how, the eyebrows were probably not symmetrical. I decided to adopt the tried and tested 50 meters test, where if the model looked good from 50 meters away, it was probably fine, and so I moved on. Now I learned how to rig the movements of the head, including this creepy rotation of the neck. I then reached the fun part, making the hair sway left and right. Since I'm too poor to afford the paid version of Live2D, I had to ration my 50 generative meshes, and this was when they began to be used. Honestly, I think that the main limiting factor of the free Live2D is not the number of generative meshes, but mostly the pathetic 2048 pixel size textures that you are limited to. I drew this model at a respectable 248 by 248 pixels because I naively thought that was the actual limit, but this was indeed not the case. At this point, I was struggling to group all the meshes under one big mesh to rig the general movement of the body. Turns out, you can just create an empty one and then drag all the relevant layers into the mesh at the side there. Eventually I did figure it out, so I could finally rig the X, Y, and Z movements of the model. As an afterthought, I might have brought in a reference for not just the body movements, but also for the head movements that I will rig later on. Looking back, I realized I probably stretched the body and the head a bit too much in some places, and not all of it really matches the perspective that the head will be facing. I started rigging the face and the movement of the head in the XY direction. I definitely think I overdid the stretching of the eye, like what is that? This is where I began noticing that I didn't draw the hair base long enough, and so I had to stretch some parts oddly and really try to finesse it into not having large and odd gaps in the head, which is honestly something I do to myself on a daily basis anyway. Honestly, this part was really tedious. It was just adjusting literally every single part of the model to look side to side. I super respect all the riggers who do this frequently, but it was actually really fun and mostly intuitive. We're finally coming to the end of building my first ever model. Just left with making this mouse cute, and here's the result. Honestly, for something that took me around 7 hours in total, and with it being my first time ever drawing and rigging a model, I'm pretty proud of myself. I'm looking to practice rigging and drawing more, so look out for that. If you enjoyed my little journey, let me know who else I should try rig. I would really love to rig stuff for people so that I can practice. If any indies want a chibi model, albeit a little bit unpracticed, let me know over on Twitter. Bye!